Well, all of us are being told that climate change is the threat, the greatest threat to humankind ever. That if we do not get climate change under control, the entire future of humanity is at stake here. Then I was pretty shocked to hear that 2014 was the hottest year on record ever. Everywhere I looked, people were shivering, they were freezing. And I heard this report and I thought, does not compute. I mean, we're here in Texas and we hardly had a day up to 100 this year. And I remember when it was 112 for 40 straight days, or over 100 for 40 straight days. And I thought something about this does not compute. I especially became suspicious. You know, there for a while they talked about global warming. Well, you don't hear anybody talk about global warming today. Why? Because the globe's not warming. And it has become obvious that the globe's not warming. All the reports are telling us that there has been not one bit of increase over the last 16 years, and perhaps even some global cooling. So never mind that. We'll just shift our message to climate change. You know, this is hilarious, because when I saw them do it, I thought, oh my goodness, are the American people gullible enough to be scared by climate change? I mean, I've been raised in Indiana most of my life, and that was one of the jokes of Indiana. If you don't like the weather around here, stay here till tomorrow, it'll change. And I think that's true almost everywhere in the world. Climate is going to change. You know, it's really hilarious because Senator James Inhofe, just now is moving to the helm of the environment for the United States of America. He's the chairman over the environment, and he doesn't believe in global warming. So the Republicans wanted to get the Keystone law passed for the Keystone Pipeline, and the Democrats said, we're not passing it unless we attach in here that you believe in climate change. Well, after some give and take and some backwards and forwards, finally Inhofe said, well, yeah, I do believe in climate change. And the Democrats were ecstatic. The greatest opponent to what they called global warming was now willing to say that he believed in climate change. So they agreed, they got the bill passed, and Inhofe said with a wink, well, sure, I believe in climate change. Everybody knows the climate changes. And yet he's the guy that wrote the world's greatest hoax, the hoax of global warming. Well, I'm glad he's where he is, because this is the most ludicrous, ridiculous thing. We're talking about brainwashing on a global scale. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, before you turn me off, let me give you absolute proof that there is no global warming. Absolute proof. I don't care whether you got doctorate degrees, whether you have master's degrees. Everybody says the science agrees that there's global warming, that it's a threat to our future. And that's the magic words, the science agrees. But I saw one petition signed by 30,000 scientists saying they did not agree. But if you're not a scientist, you can still understand this. Now, I know it's a complex thing. You know, sometimes the art is to take something very complex and boil it down to its simple essence. That's the reason Ronald Reagan was such a great president. He had a way of taking complex issues and putting them in terms all of us could understand. Well, let me give you something that anybody can understand. 1,000 years ago, they've now dug down through the ice in Greenland, and they've discovered that 1,000 years ago, they were farming land in Greenland that are now under 12 feet of ice. Now, what does that mean? Well, obviously, you don't have to be a scientist to realize that, well, it was warmer 1,000 years ago than it is today. And yet they tell us that we're on the brink of the extinction of the planet because we've got jet airplanes and SUVs and all the other industrial things that we enjoy. They're telling us that it's hotter than it's ever been and that we're endangering society. And yet we now have indisputable proof that it was warmer 1,000 years ago. And you don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to have a master's degree in mathematics. All you have to do is have some common sense. And common sense isn't very common these days. Well, anyway, 1,000 years ago, what's encased under 12 feet of ice today was farmland. And do you know as well that the northern straits were open for navigation? There's no way you could do it today. It's all frozen. But they were going, the Norsemen were making their way through the North Seas. So it was much warmer 1,000 years ago. Did the world come to a screeching halt? Was it the end of humanity? No. Okay, now, if in fact it's that simple, and it is, then why are they doing it? That's the $64,000 question. Why? I mean, we're talking about President Obama. Every chance he gets beats the drum of climate change. Now, he's very slickly quit using the term global warming, but now it's climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change. I mean, you hear it like an incessant drum beat until you say, okay, 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 enough already. All right, now I'm just dramatizing this a little bit because I need to. We've got people in high offices, including the United Nations. The UN is one of the greatest proponents of global warming, which they've also now forsaken because there's no global warming. So now they've called it climate change. Why? That's the big question. It's so simple to understand it's not true. As a matter of fact, back in the 1940s, they had terrific global warming back then. And then about 1975, there were articles, I've read them, coming out in Time magazine and other major publications warning that we were on the brink of an ice age that could threaten humanity. So we had warming in the 40s, ice cooling in the 75s until the warming of an ice age, and now we're back to global warming. So what's going on here? Well, sometimes to fundamentally transform the world, you've got to have a cause. You've got to have a belief system. You've got to have something to galvanize the populace so that they will tolerate major change in their lives. That's what's going on here. What's the dream? The dream was actually put on paper by a man by the name of Karl Marx. He believed in worldwide socialism, where everyone would be equal, everyone would have the same thing. In today's terms, it's called social justice, or some people call it wealth redistribution. Have you noticed a lot of news lately about all these people at the top have all the money? Now, they ignore the fact that the poor people have more than they've ever had. Now, I would like to see some of that huge money at the top filter down, but if everybody in the poorer classes and the middle classes actually enjoy more than they've ever enjoyed before, why do we keep harping on the gap between the rich and the poor? Who cares about the gap when everybody's doing better? And I'm looking around, it sure looks like to me that people are doing better. I go by apartment buildings where people that don't have a lot, many of them, some of the people in apartment buildings are there because they want to be there, but I go by apartment buildings and I see Toyotas and Infinitis and BMWs and some Mercedes. So the people living there that appear to be lower class, they're enjoying some really nice things. Now, if you'll think with me, you know it's the truth. You may consider yourself not so well off, but you probably own a pretty decent car. So what's going on then? Why this continual fomenting of discontent? Well, that's the way you do if you want to bring about a revolution. Okay. Brings me to my first article. The United Nations top climate change official, Christiana Figueres, announced this week that the group is actively working to, listen carefully, intentionally transform the world's economic development model, a task she called the most difficult one the group has ever taken. Now, I wonder if that has anything to do with fundamentally transforming the United States of America. That's what President Barack Obama has promised us, and he's a big advocate of wealth redistribution, and he's pushing climate change with all of his might. He's determined to do it even if the Senate will not approve a climate change treaty. He just does it without any approval, and our Senate is so namby-pamby and backboneless that they're just letting him do it. I mean, what's he done? He's taken the Environmental Protection Agency and turned it into the climate police. Now, we all know that's the truth, but there's no leadership in Congress that'll stop him. Plus, the problem is most of those guys have been intimidated into signing on with the climate change crowd, even though there's not a word of truth to it. Ladies and gentlemen, there's not a word of truth to it. It's all a ruse in order to get all of us to buy into the fact we need international laws. We need to send billions of dollars to poor countries to fight this thing called global warming, which does not exist. You talk about the emperor's new clothes. That's what we're dealing with right now. President Obama is continually harping on global warming. Al Gore, global warming, gets a Peace Prize for it. It's all the emperor's new clothes. It's all a hoax. It's all the horse they plan to ride to a one-world socialist government. That's what the plan is.